Going back to Batman here, we have Heart of Hush, of course a story about Hush, a villain that I've sort of alluded to for a little bit now here on the channel. Hush, of course, is one of the better known Batman villains created within the last 25 years. I'd put him up there with the Batman Who Laughs, but I'd argue that there is more to Hush than him, both in comics and in media, and part of the reason for that opinion, at least for me, is the story I'm about to talk about today. Hush's most famous story, of course, is the one sharing his name, Hush, written by Jeff Loeb and illustrated by Jim Lee back in 2002 and 2003 when that originally came out. It's a story that you always see in print between things like omnibuses, reprints of the regular graphic novel, or things like the compact edition. It's always something that you can readily buy at any Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, what have you. It's a story that you also see on a lot of recommendation lists, both for new readers, which is something I'm pretty strongly against, and also just for readers in general, due to the significance of the introduction of Hush, as well as the involvement of outside characters in it, as many Jeff Loeb stories do have. But as far as the characterization goes, Hush is a relatively surface-level character in the debut story that is his. In the story Hush, all the puppeteering stuff really is credited more to the Riddler than Hush himself. Hush, of course, is involved, but near the end of the story, it's revealed that it's more of the Riddler's doing than his. You also find out there that Hush's motivations are he's pissed off at Bruce Wayne because Bruce Wayne's parents died, therefore he got all the money that his parents had at the time, where Hush, Thomas Elliot, meanwhile, is on the other side of things where he wanted his parents to die, but the plan didn't work all the way, and he's stuck with his parents being alive, so he doesn't get the money. So it really boils down to just a guy being pissed off because he didn't get money, and he's jealous of a guy that has money due to the circumstances of it. Heart of Hush, meanwhile, in my opinion, adds more depth to the character and makes him more interesting overall. This is also the general basis that Hush will kind of be built on from this point on, similar to how Mr. Freeze was after Heart of Ice. And it is certainly no coincidence that both Heart of Ice and Heart of Hush do share one thing, that being Paul Dini. Heart of Hush was published within the pages of Detective Comics during 2008, so we break our mid-2000s cycle here with this book. It was released alongside the storyline R.I.P. going on in the main Batman book, that story being written by Grant Morrison. Working alongside Dini on this is artist Dustin Nguyen. Dustin has penciled the art on many Batman titles around this time period and also some in the 2010s. He also has had stretches on titles over at Image Comics as well. Dini, meanwhile, I'm sure you're familiar with as one of the writers on Batman the Animated Series. He had his run on Detective Comics and Streets of Gotham, and he's also responsible for things like Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, a very accomplished Batman writer. This story might not be the official second Hush story, but it might as well be as far as content and lasting impact is concerned. Between the debut appearance and this story, Hush had appeared in a few stories like War Games, and he appeared throughout the Gotham Knights title with arcs like Human Nature, which I'm sure are things you never heard about because they have no impact on the Batman story overall. Or at least I should say they don't really have much of a lasting impact as the decade goes on. They happened in the mid-2000s, and by like 2009, basically none of it really matters. And as far as continuity is concerned, there really isn't anything that happens in those that gets addressed in Heart of Hush. There's one thing that is left as a cliffhanger from Gotham Knights that gets picked up here, but if you're reading this in a vacuum, you won't even know that that's what it's doing. Which is both good if you have happened to read that, and if you are just walking into this after reading the first Hush story. The main gist of this story is Hush returning and continuing his attempt to perform surgery to look like Bruce Wayne, and during that attempt he goes after people that Bruce is close to on a personal level, the main person in the story being Selina, of course, getting her heart removed. Now obviously with stuff like Gotham City Sirens happening after this and all sorts of things, you know that Selina's okay, but it is still a pretty riveting story and also a good look at Hush as a person and putting up a mirror to him and Bruce Wayne as individuals. The story is one where we get a villain and try to prop them up as the anti-Batman. We've done this a few times over the years with characters like Wrath, for example, but the main difference in this instance is Hush is being propped up as more the anti-Bruce Wayne, more than just being a straight-up evil Batman representation type thing. Both Bruce and Tommy are individuals who, because of their childhood, have grown up to become people that are all about control. In Thomas Elliot's case, it's all about controlling his own life due to his upbringing that his mother put upon him, and in Bruce Wayne's case, it's all about controlling the environment around him, be it for fighting crime or for saving people because he wants to prevent what happened to him happening to other people. Throughout the story, we're shown multiple insights to Hush's backstory from his childhood all the way up to his early adulthood, roughly mid-20s or so. We don't really get a deep dive into Bruce's past, at least at the same extent, but we do get to see a reflection of Thomas in Bruce Wayne through Thomas's eyes during these periods. The thing that we're really shown with Bruce throughout the story is more what's happening in the present, which are things highlighting his compassion. They aren't in the story for an extensive amount of time, but we do get this highlighted in his interactions with both Dick Grayson and Tim Drake. And of course, his relationship with Catwoman, both romantically and as fellow crime fighters. A lot of this is the inverse of what had been happening prior in the Batman books, both Detective Comics and Batman, the book proper. I want to say ranging from like Officer Down all the way through War Games in that period, Bruce spends a lot of his time as Batman just being very angry and much more brutal than you would expect from Batman. He isn't as much of a layered character as he would be before and after that period as well. This is a stretch of comics where a lot of the more classic villains aren't really represented as much. You don't really have Joker hanging around, Riddler's taken off the table for a bit, Two-Face isn't really much of a factor, so it's really just Batman going after the more organized street-level crime aspect of his characters. So this effort by Dini, and on the flip side in the main title with somebody like Grant Morrison, they both are doing very good jobs at reinstating how good a person Bruce Wayne actually is compared to the people that he fights. And yeah, he may be a bit of an eccentric, kind of crazy person depending on how you look at it, but at least his sense of justice, morality, and his heart are all noticeably in the right. Another good example of this is when Bruce is attempting to rescue a hostage from a villain who I'm not going to mention because I don't want to spoil the story too much if you want to read it, but his interaction with trying to save this hostage and his interaction with one-on-one speaking attempts with the hostage are a really good example of this, in addition to all the stuff that I mentioned with Catwoman and the two sidekicks. On the Tommy side of things, we get a good insight of how his entire worldview was formed. Tommy has a poor and abusive relationship with his father, and his mother doesn't really do too much to stop it. This is the thing that ends up resulting in him having the whole think 5 moves ahead type of mindset that he's known for. This, of course, starts the frayed relationship that he will have with his mother throughout the entire story. But this will also lead to a lot of Tommy's downfalls that he experiences throughout his life, because the thinking 5 steps ahead mentality ends up leading to him not really realizing what he has in the present, and it also makes him watch his back way more than he really needs to, so he grows really paranoid. Tommy becomes a character who, instead of looking towards the future and trying to carve his own way, is somebody who's constantly looking backwards. After Tommy's father is taken off the table, Tommy goes into a semi-Hitchcock Psycho-like relationship with his mother. From his childhood years up until his mid-20s, Tommy ends up having to help his mother live her day-to-day life. It is revealed that, or at least it's implied, I should say, that his mother doesn't necessarily need as much help as she is demanding. Tommy ends up getting roped into this, and this becomes his entire life. In turn, during this period, his mother essentially tries to mold, control, and protect him to an overbearing degree. We're only really shown one point during Tommy's entire upbringing with his mother where he's given any slack on his leash, but it is quickly tightened and she corrals him back in. From that point on, it becomes more all about control for Tommy's mother than anything. She ends up speaking about him as more of a possession than an actual son. Tommy's social circle doesn't really seem to expand much beyond his immediate family and the Waynes, so he's growing up alongside Bruce doing various activities or just staying in similar social circles considering they're both elites. So throughout his adolescence, he can't really help but compare his own life to how Bruce is alongside him. And eventually, of course, this boils over with Bruce losing both of his parents and getting all of his family fortune while Thomas is stuck with his mom still in the picture. This is also compounded by Tommy's mom berating him for not being more like Bruce Wayne. Tommy's mom, for whatever reason, views Bruce as the pinnacle of what somebody around Tommy and Bruce's age should be like. Earlier on in the story, Tommy mentions that his mom married his dad, and his dad was the one that had the wealth and the class and all the background. So it really seems like his mother is hyper-focused on maintaining the family image and really just desiring the name and the accolades and the money and all the stuff that comes along with it, and is terrified of anything that could potentially shatter that image. It's never flat out stated in the story, but she doesn't really seem to acknowledge the whole playboy aspect of Bruce Wayne's persona, so it is entirely possible that she is just completely glossing over this and wanting to believe that Bruce is the ideal person that she seems to be projecting him as. So amusingly, Tommy's mom might be idolizing Bruce and glossing over a lot of things just to keep that idolization, where on the flip side, Tommy is hating Bruce for the opposite reason. He's glossing over a lot of things that would make Bruce a likable person to any average Joe on the street, just so he can maintain this hatred of him. We even have visual symbolization of Tommy being kind of owned and controlled by his mother with the green pendant that he wears. And it's just sad because Tommy's doing all of this stuff to defy his parents, to not want to be like his parents and get them out of the picture, where by the time he is a Batman villain, he is more like his father than he would probably like to be. And visually, at least, he has a lot in common with how his mom looks at one point in the story, and he inherits, or at least is programmed, to have the Aristotle hyperfixation that his mother seemed to have. The end of the story does a pretty good job at setting up where Streets of Gotham will pick up, which is a series that I highly recommend that you read if you haven't read it yet. Going over the art here, I think it's pretty well done. It's still a little bit of its era, but not in the same way as stuff like War Games or The Man Who Laughs is. It's not really super detailed, but I like the style that it has going on for it. The art itself is pretty consistent, and I think the color palette does a really good job at reflecting the mood of the story as a whole. It doesn't have as much of that weird brown thing going on as a lot of the mid-2000s Batman stories had. So overall, I give the art a big thumbs up. So if you haven't read Heart of Hush, or if you haven't read it in a while, I highly recommend it. It does a really good job at building up the Hush character where there wasn't anything prior. And this, like I mentioned, comparing it to Heart of Ice, is the foundation of what almost every single thing involving Hush will be built on top of later on after this. It's also just a good portrayal of Batman and a good palate cleanser regarding his portrayal compared to how he was during stories from like 2005, 2004 in that era. It's a good back to basics type thing. It's sort of in line with, not exactly one-to-one with the animated series, but I'd argue this is at least in the same realm as something like Arkham Batman, that type of portrayal, if you're a big fan of it, or at least the first two games since Dini wrote them. And it's just an overall really good character piece comparing Batman to one of his villains. I want to thank you for watching or listening to the video up until this point. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, all the fun algorithm boosting stuff. I appreciate it when you guys do that. Thank you for sticking around as well. Not really entirely sure what I'm going to talk about next time, but here on the channel we talk about plenty of Batman, DC in general, Marvel, Star Wars, what have you, all sorts of stuff. So don't forget to subscribe and stick around for much more stuff similar to this, and I will catch you guys next time.